Sometimes people don't end relationships with arguments. They end them with silence. One day, everything feels normal. You're talking, sharing things, making plans, and then suddenly, something changes. Replies slow down, messages become shorter, and eventually the conversation stops completely. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. This behavior has a name: ghosting, and it leaves many people confused. Because the hardest part about ghosting is not the rejection, it's the lack of clarity. The mind keeps searching for answers. You replay conversations. You think about every message you sent. You ask yourself what you could have done differently. But ghosting rarely happens because of one mistake. It usually happens because the other person doesn't know how to handle uncomfortable emotions. Ending a connection directly requires honesty. And honesty can feel difficult. It can create awkward conversations. It can create disappointment. It can make someone feel responsible for hurting another person. So instead of facing that discomfort, some people choose avoidance. Silence becomes their escape. Psychologically, ghosting is often connected to conflict avoidance. People who fear confrontation may prefer disappearing instead of explaining their feelings. To them, silence feels easier than a difficult conversation. Another factor is emotional maturity. Communicating clearly about feelings requires self-awareness. It requires the ability to express emotions honestly. Not everyone has developed that skill. When someone feels unsure about their emotions, disappearing can feel like the simplest solution. Modern communication also makes ghosting easier. Just digital conversations create distance. When interaction happens through messages instead of face-to-face communication, disappearing feels less confrontational. The person ghosting may convince themselves that silence will eventually communicate the message. But for the person experiencing it, silence creates confusion because the brain naturally searches for closure. Humans are wired to understand cause and effect. When a relationship suddenly ends without explanation, the mind keeps looking for a reason, and that uncertainty can be emotionally exhausting. The important thing to understand is that ghosting reveals more about the other person's communication style than your worth. Someone who disappears instead of communicating clearly is showing how they handle emotional responsibility. Healthy relationships require the opposite. They require honesty, even when honesty feels uncomfortable. People who are emotionally available usually communicate their feelings. They explain when something isn't working. They give clarity instead of silence. When you understand this difference, ghosting becomes easier to interpret. Instead of asking why someone disappeared, you begin to recognize the behavior as information. Information about their communication style, information about their emotional maturity, and information about whether they were capable of building a healthy connection in the first place. Understanding the psychology behind ghosting doesn't remove the disappointment, but it can remove the confusion, and clarity makes it easier to move forward. If this experience feels familiar, you're not alone. Many people have faced the same sudden silence. But awareness helps you recognize patterns earlier. Subscribe to Emotions and Decisions for psychology insights about behavior, relationships, and emotional patterns. Because understanding how people think and act can help you make clearer decisions in your own life.